everything, really.
Yeah.
Right.
I think he got 0.
Yeah. In my book. For sure. All right. Let's meet today's specialists. She is on the board of directors for the Independent Women's Forum. She's the only female physician who's been a member of Congress, and she's fueled by chocolates, aren't we all? But she specializes in finding homes for pets in need. She's a mother of 7, including 5 cats. Nan Hayworth is here. It's a lot of cats. All right. And she's a lawyer, author, and columnist. She's also a liberal political analyst who appears regularly on the Fox News channel. And she's a native of New Zealand who specializes in being mistaken for an Aussie. Her words, not mine. Danielle McLaughlin is here. Danielle, what's your take on this rally? Appropriate, inappropriate? What are your thoughts?
I agree with Ebony that this is something that the president has every right to do. I pray that protesters on both sides of this issue just tamp it down a little bit. We saw the drama and the terrible things that happened in Charlottesville. Let's not repeat that mistake, and that's on all the people there. Every single individual has to take responsibility for what they say and what they do.
Look, law enforcement have plenty of heads up. They can pick up their heads, and they know how to separate them. Look what Boston did last week, as opposed to what Charlottesville did the week before. So they know how to do it. On the inside, there'll be capacity. On the outside, there'll be protests. And on the inside, I'm very curious to see if the context is going to be tax reform, infrastructure. Here's my Afghanistan policy. What do you think, as opposed to lock her up? You know, I think we can do without that and see the president building on what he did last night, which was an excellent speech.
Nan, your thoughts?
Couldn't agree more with all of you, actually. The president did have a great speech last night. It was a unifying speech, and he used the theme last night of our nation's defense and really of defense of freedom for the world, defense against terrorism, to remind us all of calming the waters, you know, that we are all unified in this, and together we can live in peace and in harmony, and we will be a force for good thereby. And I think you're absolutely right, Brian, that he has to promote his agenda on domestic reforms, on reviving the economy, on putting Americans back to work, because that, too, is a very potent instrument for peace.
You know what I love what you said? When you said, I'm absolutely right, Brian. You guys want to pick up on that and build on that talking point.
We actually, let me tell the Congresswoman, we actually practiced that a few times pre-show, and you got it right the first time.
Why, thank you.
In all seriousness, though, you know, the president, this signature issue of immigration, it's his home base, so to speak. It's a place for him to pivot to, because then it bolsters and gets the energy of his base. And I don't mean that in a disparaging way. I think in this moment, it was a rough week for the White House last week for a few things. Charlottesville, then the exit of Steve Bannon. I think this will be an opportunity. I've credited the president multiple times of his ability to control the narrative. And he gets that narrative going exactly the way he wants it to. I think the timing on that part makes a lot of sense. And look, Brian, I think many people have been doing that rallying cry you're doing. It makes all the sense in the world to me to go to tax reform, to go to infrastructure. I am hoping for the sake of our country he will listen.
Right, I think so too. Look, I'm looking right now. There's been no tweets about anything other than Afghanistan, and thank everyone for coming out last night. A quiet day, then off to talk about immigration, off to talk about this rally. I think the impact of this new chief of staff is finally taking root.
And I think this rally, it'll be a huge rally. It will say, hey, look, I know that a lot of people had an issue with the way I handled things last week. And as everyone knows, I am one of those people. But when it comes to his core base of supporters, they support him no matter what. And they're going to be out there, and they're going to be excited to be out there cheering. He's going to be talking about the wall. And he'll, look, my supporters still have my back. Is the message that sends.
I just hope he does not go after Jeff Flake or John McCain.
Yeah.
Because even though that they've gone against his agenda.
Good luck with that, Brian.
I just think for the most part, you can't lose one vote. And if you look, they agree on other things. John McCain came out over the weekend or yesterday and said, hey, man, good job in Afghanistan. So, Lindsey Graham, good job. I disagree with you on Charlottesville. Like you hear, they're calling balls and strikes. I think the president can deal with that.
I think you're right. I think that, look, for as much as people want to say, McCain's a rhino or whatever about Flake has an agenda, you're right. Every vote does matter. At some point, the legislative points on the board are going to have to come to pass for President Trump. Otherwise, I say he runs the risk of kind of becoming a really, really good hype man around some issues that resonate to the American people and to their core. But if you can't legislate effectively, then 2018 becomes a different issue.
Right, and healthcare is a great example of that, right? He used the bully pulpit, but he didn't get into the issues. He didn't get into the weeds. He didn't sell a proposal to the American people. He didn't sell it to Republicans or Democrats.
He was kind of asked not to. Senator Mitch McConnell said, do me a favor, let me handle
stay
this.
out of it. Well, look how well that turned out, right? And we had a jazz band in the Rose Garden after the House passed its bill, and then everything sort of devolved from there. So I think he needs to get back on to the issues and talk to all of Americans. I think one thing that was great about last night is that he did talk to all Americans. My concern is that this rally tonight descends into just the base.
Because there's no prompter saying, and he
I didn't say
he can
that.
hold an audience for an hour.
The Dow went way up today. I call that the prompter bump. It's basically the president, because he
That's
is
genius, by the way.
He is, but I mean that in the best possible sense for the president. It shows that he is absolutely capable of crafting a message, because he won't say anything that he wouldn't approve of. He crafted that message and he delivered it just right.
Here's what I would do. I would, instead of going after Senator Jeff Flake, he could say, I will probably pressure your local senator to support me. Great. And by the way, Senator McCaskill, Senator John Tester, and Senator Joe Manchin, what are you doing? You're in blue/red states. You're on the wrong side. You're on the losing side. You guys got to come along with me. Start pressuring some of these Democrats up for re-election that really agree with them more than their base allows them to.
And do it in as positive a way as possible.
Right, carrots, not sticks, right? It would be nice to see the discourse around what you think you should achieve. Sort of done in a way that is a little bit, I guess, less dramatic and a little bit less negative, right? Because he's meant to model behaviour that we're meant to talk about with our children, and that has been for a long time some things that people have been concerned about. So use the carrot, use it well.
And you know what? I think, again, this is where your legislative advice becomes very handy. Certain issues, immigration, healthcare, more divisive than others. If you go to that infrastructure, you go to that tax reform, you're right. He positions himself quite smartly to pressure those kind of purplish red state Democrats to say, if you don't buy into this type of opportunity for your constituents, what does that make you? See, then he can make that argument.
Well, then he can make the obstructionist argument, right? Because Democrats have always been for infrastructure investment. And so we have a Republican president also who wants that too. You can't argue with him on that. And the same thing with middle-class tax cuts. No one should be arguing with the president over that.
And he's going to need every vote at the margins in the Senate.
But of course, a rally like this is when he is most likely to go off of topic, which you can't really blame him for that. That's human. When you're surrounded by people who love you, you do act like a little more,
I haven't had that feeling
quirky,
yet.
a little bit, you feel a little more comfortable. You say some stuff like, they'll be okay with it.
Swags on 100, swags on 100. Yeah, definitely. That's true. And I think that temptation is, but I agree with you, Brian. He's got to resist the temptation to be baited by that moment.
Something else is going on. Sheriff Joe Arpaio getting a pardon. It's not going to happen.
Tonight. It's not
Huckabee Sanders, Huckabee Sanders evidently gave a quick briefing. He's not on the roster. He's not on the program. They've already printed him up. They can't get their money back. So he will not be allowed to do it. The thing I would think is kind of interesting is that he did something yesterday I thought was fascinating. He brought us into some introspection. He said, hey, wait a second. I came into office saying I'm pulling out of Afghanistan, but the more I thought about it, the more I looked at it, it didn't make any sense. I changed my mind. He showed humility. And I wouldn't mind if he came out today and said, repeal and replace went really well. Let's see if we do better with tax returns. Get a laugh from people. And I think we will. And start understanding, start showing a little bit of vulnerability. He's great at punching you in the mouth. But what about backing up and showing some vulnerability?
And we know that this is a man who has deep compassion. I mean, there's so much good in that soul. Everybody who's ever worked with the president, I've met a lot of these folks personally, say that he is a genuinely good and generous man.
You are not the first person that has worked with him closely to say that, right? But for those of us who have not had that opportunity, what could you say to the president to have him show some of that side? Because I think I take you at your word, but some of us haven't seen it. So.
I think honestly the emphasis is on the president's being a moral leader. He's been a man of action throughout his life. And I think, and that doesn't mean he has not been a moral leader, but now is the time as president. He understands that this is a different role. In fact, he's said that. And he said that as much in his speech last night. He said, look, I am learning. My mind is open. And I think he just has to keep emphasizing, right, my mind is open, my heart is open to you. And that positive side, which we know he has, I think, he should be listening to everybody here, and I think he'll take that advice.
I don't know if he'll make the self-deprecating Trump care joke in Arizona. I think he'll be much more tempted to bring John McCain into it, especially if he's
I think he could channel his inner Gutfeld and have a little bit of humor. I wanted to say one thing about the Donald Trump I know before he became president of the United States. I think the one axiom, and I don't have many of them, but is you can judge somebody's character as how they treat people they need nothing from. He treats people he needs nothing from great, whether it's a makeup artist or the Key Grip. I watched him with the Apprentice crew. I've seen him with the makeup artist when he came to do our studio.
Great
I've
man.
watched him actually do these shoots when Geraldo was on The Apprentice. We went to help him out by buying a wedding dress, and the money went to a good cause, but I wish I had my $400
I actually saw
back.
you on that. I was watching
Right.
Celebrity
I was
Apprentice.
at my
watching
best.
that.